Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and Alex King here, sitting in for Steve Rowell. Today is Tuesday, February the 12th, 2019. It's 8 a.m. in New York, 5 a.m. in Los Angeles, 1 p.m. in London, Sydney, Australia. It's 12 midnight. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And Alex, first of all, thank you for sitting in for Steve. I know he appreciates it. I know I appreciate it, and I know I can always count on you. I mean, you're there for me, girl. You're there for me. I love it.
You manifested me, so
I did.
Whatever.
Boy, am I proud of that. That's like, whoa, this is good news. And speaking of news, this is where I wanted to go with the conversation for the first part today, because Joel Elston...
Nice segue. I like it.
Wasn't that one good? I like that one, yeah.
That was a good one.
Very powerful, yeah. It worked really well. But Joel Elston, our friend, posted something on his Facebook timeline that was an article posted in Harvard Business Review. Pretty salty stuff there. About 3 years ago, well, a little over three and a half years ago. It's entitled, Consuming Negative News Can Make You Less Effective at Work. And I would even add less effective at everything else in life. But I thought it was a good topic to start with. And it actually gets followed up with another one about being affected by secondhand stress. So I figured let's read through these articles and talk about them, because I have a feeling there's some good stuff in here. Plus, they're by two of my favorite authors, excuse me, Sean Aker and Michelle Gielan, who are leading figures in the positive psychology movement. Sean Aker, in particularly, The Happiness Advantage is the book of his that I really like. But good stuff. Sean always has good stuff to talk about, as does Michelle.
The Happiness Advantage. I like that.
Isn't that a good title? Yeah.
Yeah.
I stumbled on that. He had just published it a few years before I found it. I stumbled on it, believe it or not, just thumbing through the books in a library. And I saw the title.
That's the best way.
Isn't it? I liked the title. I pulled the book off the shelf. I took it home, and I was enraptured. Because of the content. I mean, the book is written okay. The good part about the book is that he includes stories. He tells stories, and that's always fun. But the takeaways from the book were really positive and really strong too. Anyway, let's take a look at this article. I'll read it out, and if you want to interrupt me at some point, feel free. Otherwise, I'll just keep going to the end, and we can talk about it.
Okay.
So it says, we've known for some time now that hearing negative news broadcasts can have an immediate effect on your stress level. But new research we just conducted in partnership with Arianna Huffington, this was September 2015, shows how significant these negative effects can be on our work days. Excuse me. Just a few minutes spent consuming negative news in the morning can affect the entire emotional trajectory of your day. In 2012, we conducted a yet-to-be-published preliminary study with Martin Seligman, who's also in the positive psychology movement, at the University of Pennsylvania, where we found that just a few minutes of negative news has a significant effect on mood. And this year, we partnered with Huffington to examine the longer-term impact of news on well-being and performance. In this study, 110 participants were blindly placed into one of two conditions. One group watched 3 minutes of negative news stories before 10 a.m. The second group watched 3 minutes of solutions-focused news. This is important. The second group did not watch saccharine stories about cute puppies, rainbows, and water-skiing squirrels, although we love that viral video. The solution-focused news group watched stories of resilience to build the belief that our behavior matters. Two of the videos included inner-city kids working hard to be successful in a school competition and a 70-year-old man who got his GED after failing the test dozens of times. And then the participants were emailed 6 hours later and asked to fill out a survey within 2 hours. This survey contained a battery of positive psychology metrics to gauge things like stress and mood. And we were stunned by the results. We even reran the analysis to double-check it, because the effects were much more significant and dramatic than we expected. Individuals who watched just 3 minutes of negative news in the morning had a whopping 27% greater likelihood of reporting their day as unhappy 6 to 8 hours later compared to the positive condition.
Wow.
Yeah. In the next phase of our research, we will investigate the impact of negative news not just on an individual's mood, but on their performance. We'll look at the effect of watching negative news on TV while at the gym, as well as the effect of negative news stories on sales and consumer service at call centers in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that negative news influences how we approach our work and the challenges we encounter at the office, because it shows a picture of life in which our behavior does not matter. The majority of news stories showcase problems in our world that we can do little or nothing about. We see the market dropping 500 points or ISIS poised to attack, and we feel powerless to change those outcomes. In psychology, believing our behavior is irrelevant in the face of challenges is called learned helplessness, which has been connected with low performance and higher likelihood of depression. There is an equally compelling body of research that links optimism to higher performance. In a classic study in the 1980s, for example, Seligman followed insurance salespeople at Metropolitan Life and found that optimistic salespeople outsold their pessimistic counterparts by 37%. Our own Our own research has shown how quickly positive cues can affect our behavior. In our previous article, Positive Intelligence, we described how a group of hospitals in Louisiana trained 11,000 doctors, nurses, and staff to make eye contact and smile at people who walked down the hospital hallways within 10 feet of them. Just 6 months later, they observed a significant increase in the number of patients visiting the hospital, an increased likelihood of referring that hospital based on the quality of care received, and elevated engagement levels for the employees. A 1-second free behavioral change taught people a different social script. We are connected, and your positive behavior can have a real impact on others. We've also seen this play out at our client companies, with the most compelling example coming from Nationwide Insurance. The president of Nationwide Brokerage Solutions, Gary Baker, decided to apply positive psychology research to the company's workday. In particular, employees begin their days with a huddle where they meet to share good news and rally around colleagues who might need some extra support that day. Those positive starts to the day, among other changes instituted based on positive psychology training at Nationwide, have led to an increase in gross revenues from $600 to $900 million and an application rate 237% higher in just 1 year.
That's insane.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Now, he says, some might argue that this is correlation rather than causation. Yeah, I suppose you could try to argue that, but good luck. However, J.J. Bowman, business development leader at Nationwide, said during an interview that the organic positive changes and optimism felt on the team did drive revenue as opposed to the other way around. So, how can you prime yourself for higher levels of performance and feel better during the day without sticking your head in the sand and tuning out the news altogether? He says, try these 3 simple research-supported strategies. Number 1, turn off news alerts. Since the majority of news alerts are, by default, negative, try turning them off for a week. Shut off push notifications to your phone or email. These alerts pull our attention away from the present moment and can lead to decreased performance as we are distracted from our work. If there's anything really important happening, you'll hear about it soon enough. Number 2, cancel the noise. In the article Before Happiness, we suggest that in the same way you might cancel the noise on a plane by using headphones, you can turn your brain into a noise-canceling machine by practicing meditation. Or try turning off the radio for the first 5 minutes of your commute. When you do turn the radio back on, don't listen to angry talk radio and mute at least 1 set of commercials per hour. It's hard to tune into the signal on our own lives when we are bombarded by the noise that surrounds us. And then 3, change the ratio. Start your day with empowering solutions-focused news. Seek out stories on your favorite news site that are transformative, which means that they empower people with action steps and potential solutions instead of just focusing on the problems. Occasionally, skip clicking on stories that are hypothetical or about tragic one-time situations that you can do nothing about, and find solution-focused news like Huffington Post's new What's Working series or CNN's New Impact series. And if you don't like that there's so much negative news, don't forget, you vote with your fingers. Every time you click on a story, you're telling the media, you want to be consuming this. That's a pretty good article, I thought. That's a really
I liked it.
Isn't that good? And some of those, I mean,
that's how I live my life anyway. I don't watch the news. Anything that important that's going to happen, I get from Facebook, so I'll know about it.
Yep. But I mean, like a
And I,
237% increase in application rate, increasing company revenues from $600 million to $900 million. Are you kidding me? Any company CEO who is not implementing this idea is taking money out of their pockets and throwing it into the fire. That's what they're doing.
Basically.
That's the equivalent. So sit up and take notice, folks. Can you imagine what would happen if this kind of thing was implemented across the board in companies around the world on a daily basis? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine?
The news would be totally different because if they weren't paying attention to the negative stuff, then people would be like, well, I guess we shouldn't report on that because no one's watching it.
Wouldn't that be powerful? Can you imagine the metrics all changing and suddenly negative news stopped selling advertising?
Yeah. That'd be insane.
It would be. It would be great, but it would be insane. It'd be fabulous. And can you imagine what would happen if not only that, but people started doing the solutions-based stuff like they talked about, so that you feel like you actually have control of your life, and they started introducing that on a regular basis, and it started improving the lives of people because they're feeling better and they're attracting more of the things they want instead of the things that they don't want. Can you imagine what kind of shift that has on the world? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness! I mean, that's mind-blowing. So
yeah.
Cool article. And then this other one. Oh, this one's going to really blow your mind. Make yourself immune. Yeah, like the first one didn't, right? Called Make Yourself Immune to Secondhand Stress.
I'm very interested about this.
And again, it's by Sean Aker and Michelle Geelan. And it reads as such. Over the past decade, we have learned how our brains are hardwired for emotional contagion. Emotions spread via a wireless network of mirror neurons, which are tiny parts of the brain that allow us to empathize with others and understand what they're feeling. When you see someone yawn, mirror neurons can activate, making you yawn in turn. Your brain picks up the fatigue response of someone sitting on the other side of the room. But it's not just smiles and yawns that spread. We can pick up negativity, stress, and even uncertainty like secondhand smoke. Researchers Howard Friedman and Ronald Riggio from the University of California, Riverside found that if someone in your visual field is anxious and highly expressive, either verbally or non-verbally, there's a high likelihood you'll experience those emotions as well, negatively impacting your brain's performance. Observing someone who is stressed, especially a coworker or family member, can have an immediate effect upon our own nervous systems. A separate group of researchers found that 26% of people showed elevated levels of cortisol just by observing someone who was stressed. And cortisol is one of those, what do you call them? Endocrines. It's one of the neurotransmitters.
It's your stress hormone.
It's a stress hormone, exactly. And it's really useful if you're about to be attacked by a tiger, but the rest of the time it doesn't serve you too well. So, I mean, unless you live in a neighborhood full of tigers, you could really do without. Now, secondhand stress is much more contagious from a romantic partner, 40% more than from a stranger. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
But when observers watched a stressful event on video with strangers, 24% still showed a stress response. And this makes us question whether we as happiness researchers should be watching Breaking Bad before going to sleep. When your taxi driver honks angrily, you can carry his anxiety all the way to work.
Yep.
When a boss hurriedly stalks into a room, you pick up her stress as you try to present your ideas. Even bankers or people on trading floors separated by glass walls can pick up the panic of a person across the room working in a separate market just by seeing their nonverbals. Mm-hmm. According to Heidi Hanna, a fellow at the American Institute of Stress, they got to do something about the name of that title of that institute, by the way. But the
Institute.
The fellow, she's a fellow at the American Institute of Stress, and she's the author of Stressaholic. That's another title that needs work. Secondhand stress is a result of our hardwired ability to perceive potential threats in our environment. She writes, most people have experienced spending time with someone who triggers a stress response just by walking in the door. This can be a conditioned response from previous interactions, but may also be an energetic communication delivered by very gentle shifts in biomechanical rhythms, such as heart rate or breath rate. The cues that cause secondhand stress can be very subtle changes in the people around us at work, yet they can have huge impacts. In fact, you don't even have to see or hear someone to pick up their stress. You can, get ready for this, you can also smell them.
Wow.
New research shows that stress causes people to sweat special stress hormones, which are picked up by the olfactory senses of others.
That's so gross.
I know, but which is the gross part, the smell or the fact that it's affecting your stress levels?
The smell.
Well, I got news for you. It's even worse that it's affecting your stress levels. Your brain can even detect whether the alarm pheromones were released due to low stress or high stress. Dang. Wow. Holy cow, our brains are amazing.
Yeah.
Negativity and stress can literally waft into your cubicle. Great, just what you need.
Waft into your cubicle.
As the research has become more sophisticated, we see that the negativity we catch from others can also impact every single business and educational outcome we can track. And most recently has been shown to impact us down to a cellular level, shortening our lifespan. According to Before Happiness, companies like the Ritz-Carlton and Ochsner Health Systems, aware of the impacts of secondhand stress, have started instituting no venting zones for their employees when around customers or patients. A patient seeing a nurse seething with stress or complaint could catch the contagion as they evaluate the care they receive, not to mention the fact that positive mindset is continually associated with positive health outcomes, as outlined by Tom Rath in his article, Well-Being. Well, actually, it's a book, I believe. In our highly connected working world, we are hyper-exposed to other people. This means negative emotions and stress become even more contagious as we have high exposure to negative comments on news articles and social media. Stressed body language of financial news shows, stressed out people on our subways and planes, and open office plans where you can see everyone else's nonverbals. In such a highly connected world, we need to find ways to improve our emotional immune system. Otherwise, we risk the negative effects of secondhand stress. Here's how to do it. Change your response. That's the first suggestion. In research we did in an investment banking company, at this particular company called UBS, with Dr. Alia Crum from Stanford's Mind and Body Lab and Peter Salovey, founder of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And we found that if you create a positive mindset about stress and stop fighting it, interesting point right there, you experience a 23% drop in the negative effects of stress. So when you stop fighting stress, you get a 23% drop in it, in the negative effects. When we see stress as a threat, our minds and bodies miss out on the enhancing effects of stress. Because even at high levels, stress can create greater mental toughness, deeper relationships, heightened awareness, new perspectives, a sense of mastery, a greater appreciation for life, a heightened sense of meaning, and strengthened priorities. Instead of fighting and being frustrated at negative people around you, take it as an opportunity to feel compassion or a challenge to help that person become more positive. Our Harvard Business Review article, Making Stress Work for You, includes more ideas on how to change your stress mindset to a more positive one. That's the article we just read. Suggestion number 2. I mean, that first suggestion alone is something I want to talk about, but let me finish the article.
Yeah.
Number 2, create positive antibodies. We need behaviors that can neutralize the negative effects of a stressed person. Instead of returning a harried coworker's stressed nonverbals with an equally stressed grimace of your own, return it with a smile or a nod of understanding. And suddenly you have the power. As suggested in the new books, Broadcasting Happiness, you can create a power lead to short-circuit a negative encounter. The first comment in a conversation often predicts the outcome. Try to start your phone calls not with, "I'm swamped" or "I'm so busy." Instead, start with a breath and calmly say, "It's great to talk to you." Mm-hmm. Just that little thing can make that much of a difference. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Build natural immunity. That's the third suggestion. One of the greatest buffers against picking up others' stress is stable and strong self-esteem. The higher your self-esteem, the more likely you will feel that you can deal with whatever situation you face. If you are finding yourself being impacted by others' moods, stop and remind yourself how things are going well and that you can handle anything that comes your way. Exercise is one of the best ways to build self-esteem because your brain records a victory every time you exercise via endorphins. That was the word I was looking for, endorphins.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last suggestion, inoculate yourself before going into work or stressful environments. For example, before we start our morning, the very first thing we do is think of 3 things we are grateful for that day. In this TED Talk that he links to, you will learn the 5 positive psychology habits that help inoculate your brain against the negative mindsets of others. And by the way, these are the 5 points that he makes in that book that I told you about, The Happiness Advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And those points are, number 1, write a 2-minute email praising someone you know. Number 2, write down 3 things for which you're grateful. Number 3, journal about a positive experience for 2 minutes. Number 4, do cardio exercise for 30 minutes. Or number 5,
Whoa.
meditate for just 2 minutes. So for those who don't want to do the
Why
cardio...
is everything else 2 minutes and then the exercise is 30? Why can't I exercise for 2 minutes?
Well, they're trying to give you options. You know, you don't have to do all 5.
These are options.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are 5 things you can do, and you don't have to do them all together. You just have to do at least one. And the more that you do, the better off you're going to be. So you could actually choose to do 2 or 3 of them. So you could write the 2-minute email, you could journal for 2 minutes, and then you can meditate for 2 minutes, and 6 minutes later you've done 3 out of 5.
Nice.
Yeah. And it summarizes by saying, nowadays we may know to avoid smoking lounges and we wash our hands after being in busy airports. But in the future, we may realize the key to health and happiness is improving our emotional immune system to protect ourselves from other stress. And of course, it's not just other people's stress that matters. Our own mindset affects the happiness of those around us. A positive mindset can improve our own lives and the lives of everyone around us. Now, that combined with that other point that I highlighted earlier are the ones that I wanted to bring out. I'm going to reread that one paragraph. Well, there's a couple here, but there's one particular paragraph I want to reread. Observing someone who is stressed, especially a coworker or family member, can have an immediate effect upon our own nervous systems. And then they describe a test, a couple of studies. One that said 26% of people showed elevated levels of cortisol just by observing someone who was stressed. And in a romantic partner, it's 40% more than a stranger. But when observers watch a stressful event on video, 24% still showed a stress response, even if they don't know who the person is. So, I mean, this tells me 2 things. First of all, you want to be careful about how you are putting stuff out so that you can help others. If we think about how stress affects ourselves, but how much stress are we putting on others inadvertently by venting and dumping and, you know, oh, my day just started really bad. Just those words. Just saying those words. Yeah. Anybody who's in your immediate environment is negatively, adversely affected in significant ways, in huge amounts. It can actually spiral their day. Yeah. Whereas the reverse is when you start the conversation by saying, "Hey, how you doing today?" You've just started a positive spiral for that person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I think that's fabulous because we're doing a podcast in which we're trying to focus on positives. So I think to myself, every time we got a couple hundred people listening to the podcast, every single time that we're doing the podcast, we're sending out these signals to 200 people to have a good day.
Yeah, I don't think we put anybody in a negative mood, so I think we're doing our part.
Absolutely, but it's not even doing our part. I like the positive effect.
Yeah,
I like the fact that we're helping people just by doing that. I think it's fabulous. And then the other side, of course, and this, I got to find that one paragraph where he talks about how we get to decide how we're going to respond when we're dealing with somebody else's stress, right? Because what he was talking about, or what they were talking about, I should say, is we can change how we react when we're faced with negative stress. The typical reaction is, well, let's run away from it. Let's turn off the news. Let's get out of the room when somebody, and I do that. Everybody does that, I think, to one degree or another. But it turns out there's a much more effective way to deal with it. Not that you shouldn't run away, especially if it's really affecting you. If it's affecting you, run away. By all means, run away. But if you find yourself continuously running away, that's when it's a good time to start changing the strategy up a little bit, making it a little bit stronger. And what he's suggesting is find a way to say there's a positive thing going on here. Now, that's controversial. That's a tough one, But what he's pointing out is that when you do that, you are building up your immune system where stress is concerned. And that's critical. Because if you've got a good immune system in place... though. Well, that's his point, though. It's not all that hard. We think that it's hard. We've been kind of trained to believe that it's hard. But actually, it's not all that hard. I mean, how hard is it to look at a situation and say, and it's a negative situation, there's a person stressed out, and instead of saying, oh, that poor person, I can't believe that's happening to them, saying, well, this is going to make them stronger. How hard is it to say that?
Yeah.
It's really not that hard at all. It's pretty easy, actually. But it does take a little doing because it's outside of our normal way of communicating. Food for thought, I think. I mean, I agree. What was the biggest takeaway for you? I read a lot of stuff there, and I threw a lot of stuff at you by reading all of that. But what stuck out in your mind the most?
What was the part about how past stress can from another person can re-trigger you as the person enters the room. Yeah. That hit me hard because that happens with me and my sister from our childhood. Yeah. So every time she comes to visit, I'm like, oh God, I'm not ready. I can't handle it. I'm going to have an anxiety attack when she walks in the room. It's good.
Your service dogs are going,
That's another thing that hit me too, because my dogs have anxiety because I have anxiety.
Yeah.
So every time my sister comes over, she's like, how can your dogs be service dogs if they're this anxious? I was like, they're this anxious because you're here.
Exactly. Yeah. And Shelley posted something that says it really well. She says it can become a habit to see the positive spin on things. And that's true. You get into that habit of deliberately changing the way you're going to respond to negative situations, and it becomes a habit. It really does. I've noticed that here on the podcast. Louise and I have mentioned it and talked about it and noticed it in our lives. This past weekend, I mentioned how on yesterday's podcast, I mentioned how Louise and I went to New Jersey to visit her sister and niece and nephew. And it was a great visit. But, inevitably, there are always things that crop up in the middle of conversations and so forth. And I saw a number of times, there was one time in particular where Lee, who is Louise's sister, I remember her saying, I don't remember what the topic was, but she says, I know it's not a good idea to bring up politics. And I chimed in by saying, you're absolutely right, so let's change the subject.
Right? Oh, God. That's like starting a sentence with, no offense, but...
No offense, but, yeah, right. I'm about to offend you. Man. Just the littlest things we can do to change not only our experience, but to improve the experience of others around us. Imagine what happens. Let's say we live in a really toxic environment, or we work in a really toxic environment. One where all the boss and all the coworkers and everybody is just in a nasty, nasty mood every day. Let's just, let's not imagine it real long. It's not healthy. But, but just for a moment, imagine that you're in that environment. And then imagine what happens if you go into that environment every day in the face of all that negativity and insist on saying something positive and upbeat every time you talk to somebody. What happens over time? I mean, it might take a while just because there are so many of them there and there's this huge negative momentum built up. But I'd be willing to bet if you do that for like a month, that a month later, everybody's mood has shifted and nobody knows why.
Yeah. Because it's contagious.
It is. It's completely contagious. And not only is it contagious, I mean, the things that he was talking about are that I keep saying it's two people, because Michelle Guillen was also part of that. They were writing this together. They were doing these studies together. But the two of them identified how there doesn't have to be anything verbal. There doesn't have to be anything that they can see, and they can still either affect you or you affect them. Either way. It could be just based on a smell that you can't even smell. I mean, you made reference, and it was a funny reference to how, that smells terrible. But I'm pretty sure the olfactory smell they were talking about was something you don't even notice.
Yeah.
You don't even know it's there.
You don't usually notice pheromones. Yeah.
Yeah. What does a pheromone smell like? Oh, well,
I can smell pheromones.
You can?
I can, yeah.
Louise can't.
That was one of the weird things that Mike's...
What's that? So, no, sorry, go ahead.
I said that was one of the weird things that Mike said about me. He was like, you have good pheromones. I was like, you do too, actually. Yeah. We like each other's pheromones.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Louise and I have both commented how pheromones make our noses itch. We haven't quite figured out what that's about. I mean, to heck with the 7-year itch, we get the 5-second itch.
Oh, gosh.
But, I mean, some of the stuff that they're talking about in these articles, it really hits you in the middle of the face, between the eyes, just how important it is to focus on the positive. We've heard about positive thinking and the benefits of positive thinking for years now, but I don't think I've ever read anything that made it that clear just how, not just strong it is, not just how important it is, how imperative it is. It's an absolute necessity to be aware of this stuff.
Yeah.
This is critical. This is critical to a happy, healthy social existence.
Yep.
Let alone work, let alone romantic relationships, let alone success in life. Just happy existence is dependent upon it. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Shelley's asking, what are we reading? These are 2 articles that are in the Harvard Business Review. The first one was recommended in a post that Joel Elston put on Facebook today. They're both from September 2015. The second one we read was called Make Yourself Immune to Secondhand Stress. And the first one that we read was Negative News Can Make You Less Effective at Work, or Consuming Negative News Can Make You Less Effective at Work. And, I mean, there are all kinds of takeaways from these articles, but the ones that I wanted to really hit on were how we affect others as well as them affecting us positively whenever we choose to focus on positive. And more importantly, the thing, and Shelley and I were actually talking about this yesterday, the thing about staying away from toxic news, because news is toxic. Most of the time it's toxic. It almost invariably is toxic, with very, very few exceptions. So the general rule of thumb is stay away from it. But as this article pointed out, it's actually almost more important to watch news selectively, to look for solutions-based news, and to stay away from news that you have no control over. So you have no control over whether ISIS attacks somebody in the Middle East, but you do have control over what you can do in your own life regarding various things. So watching an article about a guy, or a story about a guy who is age 70 and failed his GED test 12 times and then finally passed it, is a study. It's a story that reinforces for you your own efficacy, your own ability to succeed at doing things, and it makes you stronger. So it's actually a good kind of news to watch or consume, even better than the cute puppy news. Cute puppy news is great, but
it is.
but the solutions-based news is even more powerful. And
anything that shows people facing adversity, I like.
And overcoming it. Yeah. Yeah, that's the good stuff. And I also noticed, I don't know if you noticed it, the stories that they referenced weren't necessarily major, huge obstacles in the way kinds of stories. I mean, the typical kind of story that I think most people think of is the person who has no arms and no legs and manages to live a life, or something like that, which is a really extreme example of overcoming adversity. But you don't have to have articles that are that extreme. Anything about overcoming adversity is good. I mean, it could be just a normal thing of, a kid in school who overcomes a bully and the bully doesn't allow the bully to even bother him anymore. That's a positive story that has the same kind of effect, maybe even a greater effect. It's just all about focusing on, what is it that empowers us. So that word empowerment becomes pretty important, I think.
It becomes empowering.
It does, doesn't it? Not to be redundant, but it does.
Use that word in a sentence.
Yes, right. That's an interesting idea for a practice. That's an interesting idea. How many different ways can I use the word empowerment in a sentence today? Or empower?
Okay, I like it.
Let's play it for a minute. Let's see what we can come up with. So, I feel empowered whenever I go take a walk.
Do you?
I do. Yeah. Because
I feel empowered every time I look in the mirror.
Ooh, I like it. Really good. 5 stars for that one. That was good.
And for those millennials, I feel empowered every time I take a selfie.
There you go. Yeah. It works just the same way. It has the exact same effect. I mean, there's a reason why they call them mirror neurons.
Yes.
Right? Because those neurons are reflecting back to us what it is that we're consuming every single day. So if you consume empowerment, I mean, I do mirror exercises every morning now. I did do them for about 2 months. I stopped, and then I started again a couple months ago. And it does make a difference. It does provide, it's like a shield. No, not a shield. It's a toughening. It's like a toughening of my visual field, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like everything I look at seems to be a lot less controlling of me. That make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure when I was saying it, so that's why I had to ask. So, to continue with the game, I feel empowered for having told you that. Shelley just referenced what you said. She says we need to start a good news network.
I used to be a part of one, actually.
Really?
In high school, we had our own news network, and every morning during homeroom, we would broadcast. And I don't remember ever broadcasting. I was an anchor, so I don't remember ever broadcasting anything negative. It was always positive, and then what was for lunch day. So.
Well, I have thought about this before. I've never been quite sure how to implement it. But I was thinking, what if we started each episode of the podcast with like a 5-second positive news break, so to speak?
Okay, yeah.
And I'm not sure what that's where I kind of stumbled. I wasn't sure what the content should be. You know, I originally tried going
I don't think it matters.
What do you mean?
I don't think the content matters because you empower everyone depending on what it could be. So
okay.
You don't know who you're reaching based on what story.
The reason I said I wasn't sure what to do about it is because my first attempt was to go online and set up a news alert like he was talking about, only this is a positive news alert. And when I started checking the stuff that came through in the positive news alert feed, it wasn't all that positive. And there was like a dearth of material. So that kind of flummoxed me, like, okay, so what do I come up with for the daily content?
Right.
And I know that we did try to do it to some extent just by making a little chit-chat at the beginning of each of the shows, which we often do anyway, as a way of, say, okay, here's what's good that's going on in our lives.
Right.
Maybe that is a good thing, but I still feel like there needs to be other content, and I don't know what content to do. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can think about stuff, or maybe somebody who's listening in can think of it. Oh, Shelley says iHeartRadio. Yeah. Actually, we're trying to get onto iHeartRadio. I applied to get our show on.
I like that.
Yeah.
I see what you did there, Shelley.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, that was clever. I like that. I mean, if I could read articles, maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I need to pay more attention to the Harvard Business Review and look for Sean Aker articles and Michelle Gielan articles. Because, I mean, those were pretty hot articles that we were reading today.
Yeah.
But it would be great if we had something like that every single day, you know? Mm-hmm. That would be really positive and really powerful.
Start your day off right.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least I do know that when we start the show, I always try to start off with just a nice, happy, cheery hello. So I know that part is actually effective. I mean, that's what they were talking about in the article, right?
According to them, it is.
It is. And these guys do very serious research. These guys aren't LOA woo-woo types like we are. These guys do only the hardcore
science. But it still
science.
Applies, though. I feel like it's still, Yeah,
I mean, the only real difference between them and us is that they don't publicly acknowledge the law of attraction. They probably privately practice it. They just won't publicly acknowledge it because it's disreputable,
If you can't scientifically prove it with hard facts, then you can't report it.
Exactly. Oh well. Maybe hey, there's a message we can turn around. Let's turn it around to something like positive psychologists are now reporting more and more about the value of being a deliberate creator using the law of attraction.
There you go.
As an intention to put out there.
There we go. That was a good one. I like it.
Thank you. All right. But it's true. Anyway, anything that we put out there is good, that as long as it has a positive feel to it, a positive spin.
Yeah.
But talking about the news and how it depends on how we decide to respond to it. Certainly running away from the news is generally a good tactic, especially if you're feeling any kind of negative emotion on a regular basis. You want to disconnect from that because that will help to slow and stop that negative momentum. But I think there's also tremendous value in learning how to spin the news into a positive spin. I mean, they talk about spin all the time. They talk about political spin and so forth. Well, we can do our own spin, Shelley and I were talking after the podcast yesterday, and I was reluctant to say this during the podcast, but now I'm thinking maybe I should. There was a piece of news. Now, there's been a lot of news over the last decade or two about the Catholic Church and how priests have been molesting kids who are under their care. And then more recently, it's also been true of certain Orthodox Jewish groups. And then the latest news yesterday was Southern Baptists. There's a lot of Southern Baptist examples that are coming to the fore. And that is something we normally consider to be bad news. It's like, oh, God, all this terrible abuse is going on and so forth. And certainly it is a terrible thing to abuse a child or anybody else, especially sexually. But on the other hand, there's a positive way to look at it. The positive way to look at it is it's finally coming out. It's finally emerging, and we're finally recognizing what it is so that we can deal with it. That's a tremendous step forward when you realize how long this stuff has just been buried in a closet somewhere and nobody would ever allow it to come out. Well, despite all the efforts to keep it from coming out, it's coming out.
It's out.
And that can only have positive consequences in the long run. I mean, yes. There will be some negative fallout. Negative stuff can happen out of that. But there's also going to be strong positives coming out of it. So what happens if we focus on those positive, strong consequences of this stuff coming out? To me, it's got to be a good thing. Yeah.
I think it also says something for the victims that are coming out, like they're facing adversity, so and overcoming it. So it's also positive, and I like what's going on there too.
Yeah, that's really strong. I mean, I think I mentioned this to you before the podcast. I had a personal experience with that with Steve Rowell, who you're sitting in for today. Steve's off. He has a prior commitment that he couldn't get away from today, so he'll be back on Thursday and next Tuesday. But Steve went through sexual abuse in a Church of England church by a vicar. And
That's terrible.
It is. It's horrible. And in fact,
disgusting.
At one point, we were having an off-the-show conversation, and he warned me he was going to tell me this, more specific about it. It was going to be pretty bad. And he told me about it, and it was pretty bad. And even though I was prepared for it, I went like this. Oh.
Yeah.
I was feeling it right there. Even though he was looking at me with a smile on his face, and he was, telling me about what the good stuff that was coming out of it was and so forth. And it was really good stuff coming out of it. But just that alone was enough to affect me. It really shows how that second stress can come in. But like I said, he was emphasizing the good stuff that happened, and the good stuff. Talk about attracting something with the law of attraction. We previously have documented on the show within the last week how Steve and I realized that the day that I started LOA Today, which is actually Louise and I started it together 6.5 years ago on our 13th wedding anniversary, September 26th,
Lucky number.
2012. Yep. on September 26, 2012, the same day that we started that podcast, that's the day that Steve sent his letter in to the Church of England informing them that he had been abused by the vicar of his church while he was growing up and asking, or actually demanding, compensation for it. The same day we started that podcast. And we were thinking, what kind of synchronicity is this? Because now he's appearing on the podcast 6.5 years later, at the same time that he is now in the midst of creating a new gig with the Archbishop of Canterbury's office to address sexual abuse problems in the church.
Okay.
And we're thinking, this is really cool stuff. Well, the story gets even more cool because he met his wife, Gemma, and he has a really interesting story about how they met. But bottom line is they wanted to get a house, and they had no money. They had recently met. They had learned they had learned about how the law of attraction works, and they were kind of doing it in a daring way. And what ended up happening is he and she went out looking for a house, knowing they could not afford to even put the down payment down. Found a house that they liked, made an offer on it with no money. And within a couple of days of when the money was due to complete the transaction, the compensation from the Church of England came in to pay for the house.
Very nice. I like that story.
Whoa! So look at all the elements we got here. First, we have a wonderful law of attraction story. Second of all, we have a story about perseverance and overcoming adversity. Third, we have a story about changing the script around from a negative news to a positive news story. I mean, how many more pieces do you want before you say, hey, that's pretty damn good?
Right?
Like, wow, this stuff just feeds on itself, and it just reinforces itself over and over and over again. It's crazy. This stuff is just amazing. It kind of makes you wonder, where's it all going to go? I mean, where do you, if you were to project, Alex, like 10 years into the future, and let's just base it on what we talk about here on the show and our orbit, people who are hearing our stuff and so forth. What would you imagine the future is going to look like that's different from today? What would be, if you had to kind of create that scene in your mind, so to speak?
Like my vignette for the future? Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say that there would be a lot more TED Talks on law of attraction, spreading a lot more positivity and awareness of law of attraction, and the world just becoming a better, more positive place, just in general, just from the fact that people are becoming more aware of what it can do.
That's good. That's good. I also think this is my vignette. My vignette is listeners contacting us and telling us their stories about how they listened to something, they heard something we talked about in the podcast, they implemented it in some way in their lives, and they got this amazing result.
I like that too. And
getting just inundated with stories like that. Because we do get stories like that now. We're not inundated by them, but we do get them. And I'm just thinking, what happens
I get DMs all the time.
I'm thinking, what happens if you get 50, 100, 150, 200 of those stories every day?
Yeah.
First of all, now we got our news network, right? Because we got all these great stories about all these wonderful things that are happening. But secondly, I keep thinking about, we know, I mean, it was detailed in those articles. When you have one good experience, one good phrase, one good statement you make at the beginning of the day, your whole day spirals into a positive direction.
Yes.
Now start multiplying that by tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, all having better and better days every single day. I mean, this is where my brain goes, boing, I can't keep up with this.
Cannot compute.
Cannot compute. It's too much. It's overwhelming. But if I'm going to be overwhelmed by something, that's something I want to be overwhelmed by. That's a good kind of overwhelm.
Exactly.
I mean, this stuff's crazy. It's just amazing. So, we got about 10 minutes left. We've been telling all the stories. I don't see any questions or anything like that on the live stream. I think people are just kind of hooked by what we're talking about, which is cool.
Right.
But let's come up with something that gives us that last 10-minute boost before we're done with the program today.
Okay, let's see. I had a question earlier, and I can't remember what it was now.
Well, it probably had a negative spin to it. We've been focusing on this positivity so much that it just spun right out of control. It was gone.
Probably.
Let's see.
Oh, man.
All right, well, here, let's make it real simple. So after hearing and talking about what we've been talking about today, what's the next thing you're going to implement in your daily practice?
Probably try to put a positive spin on my stress. Like, for instance, when my sister comes to visit, I'm gonna be like, you know what? At least I have a sister, and she loves me, and she's coming. You know, little things like that, and she's bringing my niece. So
that's always good.
Little things like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. That's actually where we can have the most impact, isn't it? Because we deal with family more than anybody else.
Yes, I know.
and there was that one point in the article where, where 40% of our impact comes from people who we're romantically involved with or who are in our immediate family circle. Well,
yeah.
So it's like what goes around comes around, right? When you're putting out that kind of positive spin on stuff, it's going to come back to you.
Yeah.
That's going to be kind of fun to track.
I know. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I don't know when the next time she's coming to visit, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, you also have other family members too, so you can really be doing it with everybody. Not worrying. It doesn't have to be somebody who is a high stress person. It can be everybody in your life. It can be people who are your lollipop people.
I don't have high stress people in my life, though.
So it can be your lollipop people. It can be the good people in your life.
Lollipop people.
Yeah, that's something Louise taught me. A lollipop person is somebody who has a positive influence on you, who helps you feel good.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Louise. I like that.
So we can do it with anybody. Actually, it's probably easier to start that way, now that I think about it.
I would think so, yeah.
Because there's no stress. So
right.
What a great way to practice. And you're going to get faster results, too, right? Because there's not all that negative momentum to overcome, so it's going to come back quicker.
You're right.
And we all know that's really helpful when it comes to trying to increase our belief in how the whole thing works and our sense of self-esteem and self-love and so forth. We want to get quick results as much as possible. There's a way to get quick results.
Exactly. All right. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how it works.
I've been trying to do it a little bit more, too, but I'm thinking I'm going to do it even more. I mean, the primary person that I'm around every day is Louise. So I'm going to I'm going to put more out to see if I can give her that kind of support and watch what happens.
Yeah. That sounds good. I like it.
It's going to be a fun experiment. It reminds me, do you remember the movie, have you ever seen the movie The Celestine Prophecy or read the book by the same name?
Nope, never heard of it.
Okay. It was a book that came out in the 1990s by a guy named James Redfield. And it has a lot of the concepts that we use in our law of attraction discussions and that positive psychology talks about. But it's more about the interaction of human beings on a spiritual level and the energy that's involved, the actual energy that you can observe. In fact, they actually show you a couple things you can do to observe energy around people and so forth. In fact, one of them you can do, you can just hold your fingers together like this, like a very small distance apart, and then kind of defocus the fingers. And when you do that, when you defocus the fingers, not make them real sharp, but make them fuzzy, and look kind of beyond them, you start to see a little smoky wisp.
Ooh, hold on.
Yeah. Real close together, like about a 1/4 inch apart, maybe a 1/2 inch apart. And kind of defocus the fingers and focus further ahead. And especially if you have a nice high contrast background in the background, you'll start to see like a little wispy thing.
I gotta use my black leather furniture. Hold on.
Yeah, right. You gotta have something with some contrast so you can see it. Color helps too. Bright colors help.
Okay.
And move the fingers up and down toward each other, away from each other, and move them very slowly, and then just watch what happens.
Oh, I see it.
You see that?
Yeah.
That's energy. That's
crazy.
That's out of your aura.
That's insane.
Yeah. And the movie was about all the different ways that we can tap into that energy. One of the things that the book postulated, which I'd been thinking about for some time, wondering if it was really true. Now I'm beginning to think it really is true, is that we can send energy to somebody else.
Oh, yeah, I definitely believe that.
And that energy can positively or negatively impact them depending on what we're sending. So if we decide, for instance, that we're going to send positive reinforcing energy to our spouse or our family members or people we're dealing with on a regular basis, that is going to positively reinforce them. And we now know it's actually demonstrably measurable, which is cool. So, okay, let's start putting that out there and let's see what happens. What happens if, like, for instance, I can think of one thing that I really wish Louise would change for herself. And I'm going to start putting out, instead of thinking about that negative thing, I'm going to put out the positive opposite of it.
Okay. Which you're really good at.
I'm going to put it, thank you, I appreciate that. But I'm going to put that out mentally. I'm not even going to tell her I'm doing it. I'm just going to just put it out there and just imagine her. I'm going to create my little vignette. Imagine her doing and thinking and behaving in the positive manner instead of the negative manner. And then just watch what happens.
I've actually done this as a kid.
Yeah?
When I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and I used to share a room with my sister. And I had restless legs from just running around all day as a kid. And I could not get to sleep.
Okay.
So I would sit there and in my head go, send the restless legs to my sister. And it would disappear. I swear to God it happened. Yeah.
I hesitate to ask, did your sister get the restless legs? But
well, I don't know if she got them, but it went away from me. So that's all I know.
Well, it is
that's
true.
Proof that it does work.
Yes. Well, actually, I experienced it when Louise was going through her medical stuff, which she thankfully is still on the upward healing path on. But she, at one point, we were both feeling really, really low, and I deliberately pushed myself into focusing on the positive result, and got a really quick response, like within 24 hours, a big, big response, and totally unexpected, which was the best part. So I do, like you, I do know it works. I think I'm mentioning it mainly because I'm kind of asking myself, why am I not doing this more often? So this is like the opportunity, it's the opportunity to do it more often. Like, let's start doing it right now. So, okay. Well, then that's my, you and I are going to be doing the show this afternoon too.
Yes.
So I will report to you if there have been any results of applying it during the 6-7 hours between shows.
Same.
Okay. So the challenge is on. Can we produce a quick result? Because you can't always control that, but let's see if we can do it.
We'll see what we can do.
Why not? And by the way, we are going to have a third person joining us today, Bill G., who has previously been on the show, who does some amazing things. He's kind of like Linda Armstrong in a sense, in that he does things with pendulums to identify where people need to shift up their energy. He talks about in terms of getting rid of negative energies and so forth, and identify what steps they can take in order to get themselves into a positive place and have better results in their lives. He's going to join us, and we're going to talk about, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. We're going to make something up, but whatever it is going to be good. I'll be interested to see what his response is to this little experiment we're doing. I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
In fact, hey, let's do this test, Alex. Okay. I don't know. Okay. I don't know that he's going to see this program. I'm going to assume that he's not going to see the one that we're doing right now. Okay.
Okay.
So let's put something out there to see if we can influence him to say or do something positive, something specific. So, let's say, I know, let's see if we can put out there that he wants to say something positive about you.
Okay.
All right.
I like it.
So Bill's going to come on the program, and at some point, for a reason he doesn't even know what it is, he's going to say something really cool about Alex.
That would blow my mind.
That's going to be fun, isn't it?
Yeah, this is fantastic.
All right, this is a good test. I like this. So, and this is going to be the first of many things that we're going to test. So, okay.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. This has been fun. I'm glad we talked about these articles.
As always.
Really good. And I look forward to talking to you later this afternoon. That's going to be good too.
Okay.
And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.